What caused the notion of Black Africans as a significant risk? Explore the historical events, attitudes, and beliefs that produce this perception. Join us as we peel back the layers of a story that raises critical concerns about bias and its long-term consequences. Interested in learning more? This old hierarchical worldview, which encompassed all living creatures, beginning with the smallest organisms and finally extending to God, became for the proponents of slavery a perfect depiction of the realities of inequality that they had established. It began with the simplest species and worked its way up to people, angels, and beyond. The physical distinctions between African Americans and Native Americans eventually developed to serve as emblems or indicators of social standing. It was around this period that the concept of race came into widespread usage to refer to the ranking and inequality of these peoples, or more specifically, their position on the chain of being. Have you ever pondered why Black Africans were historically considered a serious risk? What caused this threat and danger perception? Was it cultural misconceptions, economic worries, or deep-seated biases? Join us as we explore this historical occurrence and the complex relationship between power, bias, and perception. Let's go back to see how these perceptions determine our present and future. The Haitian Revolt of 1791 exacerbated African racial stereotypes. This increased American fear of slave revolts and vengeance, leading to stricter and more demeaning treatment. Blacks and Indians were commonly portrayed in grotesque ways, instilling dread and contempt. Stereotyping of low-status racial groups was always present in the public mind and influenced all relations. By the mid-19th century, race was seen as a species-level differentiation, at least for blacks and whites. The notion of separateness suggested by this declaration became societal policy. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery in 1865, but racial ideology became a key form of social difference in both America and Britain. The U.S. Black Codes of the 1860s and Jim Crow legislation of the 1890s legitimized racism. More laws were passed to discourage marrying and intermating, and public facilities were segregated, especially in the South. The country's low-paying, unclean, and unpleasant jobs were given to the Negro, who was only fit for them. Supreme Court rulings like the 1857 Dred Scott case established that Negroes could not be U.S. citizens. They were excluded from white society but not wealth production. In 1896, the Supreme Court allowed separate but equal facilities, ensuring that the racial worldview, with its features of separateness and exaggerated difference, would persist. White European and Arab voices have historically dominated Western media, contributing to the propagation of unfavorable stereotypes. Because of this hegemony, stories have been formed that sometimes present civilizations outside of these spheres in a biased and stereotypical light. Inaccurate depictions of other cultures can contribute to the perpetuation of stereotypes and bigotry. Recent initiatives in the media sector aim to correct this by promoting representation and inclusivity, which will allow for a more fair and truthful portrayal of the world's diverse cultural landscape. These initiatives work on eliminating institutionalized bias in the media and fostering a more inclusive media climate. Exclusion and dehumanization are common social outcomes of the fear of physical superiority. Those with superior physical abilities have always been viewed as potential enemies of the state. Because of this worry of an uprising of authority, these people were routinely kept out of influential positions. This marginalization evolved into a form of dehumanization, with the dominant class using the superior physical abilities of the physically weak as an excuse for their position. This trend illustrates the complex relationship between terror, authority, and the dehumanization of individuals based on their appearance. Some extremist ideologies once promoted a doctrine called genetic annihilation, which falsely claimed that genetic differences between ethnic groups will be wiped out through intermarriage. Genetic science has debunked these ideas long ago. The unproven idea of a Black African intelligence threat has also been used to sustain racist attitudes. These misconceptions, which have their origins in prejudices of the past, have contributed to widespread hostility. It cannot be emphasized enough that racial differences do not exist in IQ. For the sake of promoting understanding and equality among all people, regardless of their genetic heritage, it is crucial that these damaging notions be debunked. Fear among non-blacks has complex historical roots, including the suppression of knowledge about Africa's ancient cultures and the rapacious looting of her resources. Colonialism and racism had left a lasting impression, perpetuating harmful generalizations that are still widely held today. As a result of centuries of colonization, Africa has been stigmatized as a backward continent, and the glory of its ancient civilizations and cultures has been forgotten. At the same time, the brutal exploitation of Africa's natural resources exacerbated existing disparities. Thanks for watching. For more, kindly subscribe to our channel.